Through this video tutorial, you will learn how to examine the data we have collected. This video is sequenced in the following order. First, we will learn how to navigate to the individual level student graphs. Then, we will learn how to view the class-wide group data. Then, we will learn how to view different groups within the graph table. Throughout each step, we will talk about how the data help inform educational decision-making and illustrate the utility of the help resources. If you have questions after viewing this training video, please contact our team. We will assist you in any way we can. The first step is to log into the application. Using the application to view data does not require logging in as a student and teacher on two separate devices. Since we will be reviewing data, not administering assessments, we can log in just as the teacher. It is important to note that you can also navigate in the ways I'll show you today immediately after an assessment, too. You do not have to log out and log back in as an individual teacher. Both approaches work equally well. There are multiple ways to get to individual graphs. Users can view individual graphs by touching the graph icon on an individual student's screen, by seeking out a particular student in the Progress tab, or from the menu drawer in the option labeled Individual Graphs. From the home screen, I will touch the Progress tab so that I can view data on all students in my Progress Monitoring group for this class. These are only the students in this class. If I want to view a student in a separate class, I will need to navigate to that class. On this screen, I can see all students who are currently being progress monitored. Instead of selecting the Assess Now button, I will select the graph icon. Some students may be receiving progress monitoring for more than one domain and will therefore be listed more than once. Be sure to select the graph icon for the assessment you wish to view. Once I touch the graph icon, it brings me to the individual graph for that student. Something important to note is that because it is best practiced to only examine trends in data if there are multiple data points, the individual graph option will only work if the student has 2 or more data points. If we try to view a graph with fewer than 2 data points, a notification will pop up alerting us to this. Data points can be any combination of screening and/or progress monitoring data points. I will select to view the graph for student 6. Right away, we notice a notification. The program is designed to help teachers notice when interventions are needed. So if 3 consecutive data points are below the selected aim line, an automatic alert will pop up that asks the teacher if they have considered an intervention. Touch OK to minimize this notification. Then I am immediately prompted with a screen to pick an aim line. I need to determine if I want my student to have a goal of meeting the next season's tier cut line, or the tier cut line at the end of the year. If I am making this decision late in the year after the winter screening assessment, the aim line selection will yield the same results because only the spring cut line will be available as a goal. Once at the individual graph screen, we can see who the student is, what class he or she is in, and what measure we are viewing. I will select the Graph Options button to change the graph features. If I want to view only the student's screening scores, I will select All Screenings from the Screening option. Next, I will select the green Show Me the Graph button. If I want to view both screening scores and scores on progress monitoring, I will select Progress. Now I can see screening scores depicted by stars and progress monitoring scores, which are depicted by circles. Let's take a minute to examine the graph. At the top is the title, and the x-axis has the date ranges of when the assessments were given. On the left, the y-axis shows the scaled score range. It illustrates performance on the measure in a scale that is easily interpretable. The green line across each of the 3 seasons represents the Tier 1 line. The Tier 1 line represents the location that separates student ability between candidates for intervention and candidates who are doing well in the typical or current instruction. Below that is the legend. The legend provides an illustration of all the variables you'll see on the graph. The stars represent the screening points of fall, winter, and spring. The circles represent the progress monitoring points. The circles will only appear for students who are being progress monitored. Keep in mind that the data points, whether screening or progress monitoring, provided on the graph are color-coded. A red data point depicts a student ability level that is below the expected Tier 1 line. A yellow data point depicts a student ability level that is near the Tier 1 cut line or within 1 standard error of measurement. A green data point depicts a student ability level that is at or above the Tier 1 cut line, indicating the student's ability is appropriate for success in typical classroom instruction. You may notice that there are vertical lines or standard error of measurement bars extending through each data point. These bars help us see the confidence interval. Every test inherently has some error in it, and because of this error, the student could have scored slightly higher or lower than the recorded score that is shown by the circle. However, the bands we see help give us confidence that a student's score is reported correctly. We can think of it this way. In 95 of 100 assessments, the student's true score will be within the range we see here. It helps provide a visual of the student's true score. It is important to consider the standard error of measurement when looking at the student performance because it can help us conceptualize where the student's true score is around the Tier 1 cut line. Next in the legend, I see a blue circle with the number 1 in it. This depicts the start of an intervention, but only appears on the graph when I select an intervention for the student from the Manage Intervention button. We'll talk more about this in a minute. Another thing I see in the legend is the aim line. The aim line shows the line from the median or middle performance from the first 3 data points to the winter Tier 1 line or the spring Tier 1 line, based on what we previously selected. If I change the end point, either winter or spring Tier 1 line, the line will automatically adjust. To do this, touch the Select Aim Lines button. I can also see the trend line in the legend. The trend line is a depiction of the general trend of performance on all screenings and progress monitoring assessments so far. Trend lines appear when the performance is below the Tier 1 cut line. If scores are above the Tier 1 cut line, a trend line will not appear. If you look closely at the graph, you can also see that the data points do not show you the actual value. To examine what the actual value of the data point is, you can use the table to produce an estimate, or you can touch the data points listed in the table below the graph and the corresponding data point will be emphasized. In addition, you can select 1 or more data points at once. As previously mentioned, I can choose to implement an intervention if a student is not making adequate progress. To do this, I will select the Manage Intervention button. From here, I can type in the title of an intervention that I think will improve this student's skill. For example, I could type in Shared Book Reading. I can also choose the date the intervention will start. After doing this, a line will appear on the graph that depicts the intervention. The title of the intervention will appear on the graph to remind me what I delivered to the student at the time period. For each student, we can apply up to 3 interventions in an academic year. If I begin a second or third intervention for the same student, a blue circle with a number 2 or 3 will be auto-populated on the graph. Now, once I go back to the progress monitoring page, I will see the intervention icon appear next to the student so that I can easily view from the list who is receiving an intervention. If I want to stop an intervention after it has successfully helped a student, I will touch Manage Intervention and select Delete. It will be removed from the graph. Another function you can see from the graph is the Share This Graph button. Touching this button allows me to email this graph to someone I would like to share this graph and table with. I can enter the recipient's email, and a PDF of this graph, as well as the table below it, will be sent via email. Now that we've looked at the individual graph, we will look at the graph table. Let's take a look at another class. First, I will open the menu drawer. Then, in order to find my other class, I'll touch the first button on the menu drawer and scroll until I find my Practice Class 1. Then I will select it and touch the green Go to Student Roster button. Now I will open the menu drawer once more and select the Group Data button. From here, we are brought to the Group Table. The table allows us to see a visual depiction of the number of students performing at the Tier 1 and Tier 2-3 level for each season of each domain. It is important to remember that these scores represent screenings and not progress monitoring scores. If you look closely at the table, the measure title is listed in the top left, and the 3 bars below represent the results from the fall, winter, and spring screening. The one student we see in the color red tells us one student scored below the Tier 1 line for picture naming at the fall screening. We can actually touch each of the bars in order to see the names of the students in this group. For example, the one student we see in the orange tells us one student scored close to the Tier 1 line for the winter screening of sound identification. The students in blue represent the students who have not yet been screened, and the students in gray represent the students who discontinued on the assessment. Just like in the individual graphs, we have the ability to apply filters and narrow the results we see to a certain group. We can do this by touching the Select Filters button and selecting our group. Notice you can select the Help button at the bottom of the screen and overlays will appear describing in detail the function of different areas of the graph. Now that we've looked at the group table, let's navigate to the group graph. Unlike the multiple ways to get to the individual graphs, the group graph can only be accessed by going through the menu drawer. Touch the Home button on the bottom of the screen. Now I will open the menu drawer once more and select the Group Data button. From here, we are brought to the Group Table. Touch Group Graph instead of Group Table. The very top of the screen shows us which class this graph is for, and any specific filters we've chosen. If we wish to modify something on the graph, we can select the Change Filters button. If we wish to view different groups of students, say, for example, students who are in the Tier 2-3 group, or students who are English language learners, we would filter for them in the Change Filter option. Similar to the individual graph, Group Graphs shows the dates of data collection along the x-axis and the range of scaled scores along the y-axis. Similar to the individual graph, there is a small legend below the graph. The stars depict the seasonal screenings, the circles depict the progress monitoring, and the green line depicts the Tier 1 line. To see how one student is doing, select their name on the table below the graph, and their data line will be highlighted. Just like in the individual student graph, once selected in the table below, their line turns blue and their data points are outlined in blue. This allows us to clearly see all the data points for one student. The table shown below the graph is a list of all the students present in a particular group. For example, if I filtered for only Tier 2-3 students, the table would show only the students who met this criterion. The table also shows us the age of each student as well as their English language learner status. By looking at a group snapshot of all students in a class, we can see which students are progressing from season to season, which students are performing relatively the same across time, and which students are candidates for intervention. Please note that we can share this graph with others in the same manner as the individual graph by simply touching the Share This Graph button and entering in a recipient's email. This concludes the video tutorial for how to review data within a multi-tiered system of support. We reviewed how to navigate to individual graphs, group graphs, and the group table. We discussed how different functionalities within each can help us see which students are in need of additional support. If you have any questions as you begin to work with the graphs, feel free to watch the video as many times as you need by going to the menu drawer and selecting the Demo button. This takes you to the YouTube channel where our video tutorials are housed. You can also contact our team and we will assist you in any way we can.